Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Marquette University Law School, the Lubar Center. I'm Mike Goucher, and this is On the Issues. This is our continuing series of conversations with news and policymakers, people who are doing interesting, important work in this region and beyond. Today, we are joined by the President and CEO of the United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County, Amy Lindner. Amy Lindner became president of the United Way, this four-county United Way, back in 2018. She added the CEO title in 2019. Before that, she was president and CEO of Meta House, a place that works with women who have addiction issues and helps them and their families. And she's also an attorney, used to be a partner at Reinhart Boerner Van Deuren. And we may talk a little bit about that later on. But first of all, Amy, welcome very much to On the Issues. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mike. Really a pleasure.
You know, I think about the job you have today, and I guess I think of the interesting perspective you have on the health and well-being of our metro area. And I'm wondering, now that we're 8 months into this pandemic, things have changed for a lot of people over this time. Tell me how the community looks to you from your perspective at this moment in our history.
Yeah, so, like everywhere, Mike, there's a lot going on here in, our region. And a lot of it is enormously hard and enormously scary for people, not only the day-to-day realities that some people are living with, but also the weight of the unknown. I think we all are really resilient. People are really incredible and amazing in so many ways. But no question, it's easier to get through something tough when like, all right, I got to push till February 1st and then, it'll be okay. And we haven't had that. And news of the vaccines is very promising, and I think feels like hope at the end of the tunnel for some people. But we also know there's a long, I'm afraid, really, really hard stretch between now and when we get there. So everything that people are already feeling in terms of fatigue, in terms of very real economic pressures, for their families, we're not through it. It's going to be a hard stretch ahead, and we know how hard that is.
Let's talk for a moment about the basic necessities, because you see these visual images from around the country, people in lines for miles at food pantries. Let's begin there. What are we seeing in Metro Milwaukee in terms of the need for food right now?
Food security is a very real issue in our community right now. Housing security is a very real issue. The list really goes on and on. We have two huge assets in this community that I don't think all communities had in the same way that we had when this started. And one was an enormously skilled, good set of nonprofits that work in our region. If you live somewhere that hasn't historically supported those organizations in your community, when your community really, really needed them, they weren't there. And we've proven, and I hope we get a chance to talk about some of the ways we can lift services differently, that we can do things differently, but we weren't starting from scratch. We were starting from a place both where we had really skilled boots already on the ground, sort of across that four-county footprint. And we also have a community of people who really care and people who really want to help. And so when United Way started fundraising specifically for COVID this spring, we had an outpouring of people who wanted to help, either supporting us or supporting directly organizations that they care about. And being able to lift those services in real time and not have a whole community dependent on this one location for potential help, helped everybody across this four-county region.
So we're doing better than other places, those places that I referred to, where you do see those pictures and you go, wow, that is really trouble. We're in better shape than that.
I hope so, right? I mean, there's still real need. I don't want to discount that in any way. But if this part of the community can get a little bit of help over here, and this part of the community can get a little bit of help over there, and we all sort of keep that good safety net going, then yes, we are definitely better off than we would otherwise be.
You mentioned the other key necessity, and that is shelter. I think as Matt Desmond, the author of the book Evicted, said, if you don't have shelter, everything else just sort of falls apart.
Yeah.
And so how are we faring right now? Because some people certainly have seen consequences because of the pandemic. They may have lost their jobs. They are still trying to get by. What are we seeing in terms of people with shelter concerns right now?
Yeah, there are a couple of pressures on the shelter side and impacting people, and a couple of things that have helped a little bit. So there were some moratoriums in place that prevented people from being evicted for some time. The federal moratoriums that were at the start of this were certainly nice in that they applied to everybody, but they didn't mean that you didn't owe that rent. It only meant that you couldn't be evicted during that time. The current federal moratorium is different. It does not apply sort of automatically. It's available as what a lawyer would call sort of an affirmative defense, that once an eviction action has been started, a tenant can use the fact of their unemployment or their reduced hours or whatever is causing their economic inability to pay their rent as a defense in court, and courts have the ability to say, we're going to stay this eviction. We're not going to allow it to happen right now. So both of those have helped people stay housed for the time being, but there definitely is going to come a reckoning for tenants who are way behind on rent and are really going to struggle. On the positive side, we had a lot of really good pieces in place thanks to great work by the county and city of Milwaukee. We have great partnerships in Waukesha as well. We at United Way, when we announced our goal last year to end family homelessness in our region, which we call our Safe and Stable Homes Initiative, that was the product of really sort of next level collaboration between us, our corporate partners, the municipalities that we're working with. And those were amazing building blocks to have in place at the start of this. One of the first huge projects that we were able to help lift early this year was Clare Hall, which I hope everyone has heard about. But Clare Hall was a partnership with everybody I've already named and the Archdiocese and National Guard, who helped us provide housing space available both for people who were COVID positive, but not so sick they needed hospital beds, but who also didn't have a place to safely quarantine, a place for those folks to be, and folks who were high risk because they were experiencing homelessness, because they didn't have a safe place to be, and because shelters weren't operating at full capacity, because we were trying to keep people separate from each other to avoid contagion in those early months. So sort of all of these factors came together. Us being able to open Clare Hall did a couple of amazing things. One, it was safe for the people who were able to be there at that time. The other thing it did, Mike, is let us put our arms around those individuals who are already homeless or precariously housed. And United Way, the county, so many great community partners have sort of leapt into action. And the vast majority of people who've left Clare Hall have left not to go back to the shelter system, but have left for their own permanent housing. So really good work helping people get to a much safer, much more sustainable long-term situation. So, there's a lot of components to it. There are a lot of pieces. There's a lot of work ahead. But I'm really glad for all the building blocks we already had in place to help us leap more quickly into action here.
Two questions related to that. How concerned are you about what happens after the first of the year? Right now, some of these moratoriums on eviction go away, at least they're scheduled to go away. How concerned are you about that?
I'm very concerned. I hope both that we can hope from action from the state and federal governments. No question, communities and individuals need significant help here. So my hope is that will be coming, but whatever happens at that level, that need is going to be very real here. And so, United Way campaign, organizations that other people support that are in that housing space, this is a really key, important time to make any investments people can have the ability to make.
And you mentioned, Amy, that the goal is to end homelessness in the four-county area by 2025. Does the pandemic change that goal at all? Does it make the timetable different? What can you tell us about that?
I hope not, Mike. So, our current goal is to end family homelessness in our region by 2025. We'll have, that next, we hope, leg ahead after we get that one, get that one where we want it. But yeah, in some regards, it makes it worse because we know there's going to be a spike in homelessness. There already is a spike in homelessness numbers in our region. On the other hand, though, we have this beautiful, unprecedented collaboration that's helping us make progress. And these collaborative sort of muscles that we're building right now are going to last beyond this pandemic. So we're going to have those relationships, that trust, those pieces in place that I think are going to accelerate our work in a lot of ways. I think about all of the partnerships that have happened during this time at Milwaukee Responds. So, one of the things we needed to do in this pandemic is collaborate better, collaborate differently, particularly among funders. And with the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, Bader Philanthropies, MCW, Brewers Community Foundation, Silver Family Foundation, these great organizations in town, like us at United Way, we're just getting bombarded with requests from our nonprofit partners early this year. Of course, they have these incredible, unprecedented needs. But when funders aren't talking to each other, what can happen is all of your dollars go in this direction because it's this emergency right now, and you miss the fact that there was this emergency sort of 2 days behind it in this other direction. So this partnership in Milwaukee Responds, we have all of these funders and more have been regularly communicating, multiple conversations a week on the front end, still ongoing now, where we were saying, all right, let's all come under a housing task force. Let's do a food task force. Let's do a task force around K-12 education. Let's do a task force around physical health. And let's make sure we're talking to each other about what investments are needed in that area and how to best use all of our resources to make sure our community is best served. So, I heard in a meeting last week, Mayor Barrett said, I don't want this to go away at the end of this pandemic. I want these types of collaborations and communications between our very important nonprofit sector here to continue. And we agree. We think it's incredible.
So in a way, I hear you saying, despite the incredible challenges brought on by the pandemic for your organization and others, you see an opportunity to emerge even stronger and with better partnerships moving down the road in the future.
No question. I think that's right. Just, as I described, Mike, for sort of that collaboration and communication between particularly funders. But I also think about what's the system we're building for after this, and in how many ways have people's eyes been open to existing inequalities in our community. And I don't think very many people are interested in going back to how we were doing, going back to the exact way we were doing everything before. I'm involved with so many conversations where people are saying, some of this is better. And how do we make sure the better we're building towards is better for everybody and not just better for some people? So it's a hard time. Our team at United Way has really been sprinting since March, and I'm so proud and so grateful of our board and our staff and all, our donors and all these incredible people. But there's definitely some good coming out of this, and we use that to sort of fuel the tank on days where you're especially tired.
One of the things that I often hear in at this moment amongst nonprofit groups is whether or not they will make it to the other side of the pandemic. Let me be blunt about this. Are there agencies that you support who are going to struggle to survive for the entirety of this pandemic?
I think so. Yeah. I think there will be nonprofits that we currently fund who will not exist a year from now. And I think there are nonprofits that we don't fund in our region who will unfortunately be in the same boat. And so, when you're facing that, and let me say it differently. A nonprofit for a nonprofit's sake only has so much value, right? When we care about nonprofits, we care about them because of the services they're able to deliver that our community needs. And so my hope is, every person sitting on a nonprofit board right now, and I know your audience is on a lot of them, these are the times to be having really hard, really forward-looking conversations. What's most important is not that this 501c3 structure exists. What's most important is that we can deliver services our community needs. So there are some small nonprofits that frankly could be programs of larger nonprofits that have more economies of scale and can do things a little differently than some. Other small nonprofits are killing it and doing exactly what they should be doing in their corner of the community, and that's great too. But we don't need 500 different tax, sort of efforts and 500 different fundraising efforts and 500 different IT departments. And, you sort of think everything that it takes to run a nonprofit. And my hope is we can end up on the other side of this with a stronger net of services because we're doing collaboration better.
The pandemic, and this has been talked about a fair amount, but I'd like to get your perspective on this. We hear a lot about how the pandemic has exposed the glaring inequalities that exist in not just Milwaukee, but in cities around the country. What have we learned from this pandemic about our own community?
Yeah, I think it depends who you ask, Mike, because I think when you say, what have we learned? I know exactly why you're asking it that way. And a lot of us have learned a lot, but I also have a lot of empathy for members of our community who say, I've been saying this all along, or I've seen this all along. And so I think one of the things the pandemic is doing for all of us is reminding us the people we need to be listening to and the perspectives we need to have at the table. And those are phrases that have been used for a long time, but I'm not sure we have fully lived the values inherent in those phrases as we should have been. So my hope is, things are going to look a lot different on the other end of this. And I know that they can. This community is just made up of so many incredible people who care so much. And I think that's 80% of what you need to be able to put your shoulder in and really change things. I live in Milwaukee, I live in Wauwatosa, but I live in this area. I grew up in Waukesha because my family is here. Like, I can't imagine living anywhere that my family isn't. But I also think one of the lovely things about working in the nonprofit sector in a community like this is we're of a size and scale where you can really see progress. When we really put our shoulder into something here in our community, you can see the needle move. And I don't know if the nonprofit leaders in cities much, much bigger than ours get to see that in the same way that we do. And so I know change is possible. I know people here are good people who care about people. And so I'm really confident we can do a lot together.
I mentioned inequalities, and I wondered if you might talk for a moment about something that the United Way is doing here, which I found kind of interesting. It's a concept called tequity.
Yeah.
Explain to us what that is and the need for it and what you're doing about it.
Yeah. So, some of the things we talked about, some sort of building blocks we had in place at the beginning of this pandemic. We had already started our work in homelessness. We had already started our work in reducing barriers to employment and advancement, which is a specific initiative around African American unemployment in our community. But we also had to lift the new. We also had to, move much faster than we're used to moving as an organization. And one of the things we saw very early on, so many people saw, was a real inequity about who had access to technology, who was able to remote learn this spring, who was able to work remotely, either because their job allowed them to do or they had the technology to do so. And so the technology gap is both physical devices. Do you have a computer in your house? A lot of people would say yes, not everybody. How many of us had 2 computers in our house? How many of us had 3 computers in our house? And if you had 2 children and you yourself have a job that you're trying to do remotely, you can't do that with one device. You need that with, you need the devices in your house to be able to do that. The other thing not everybody had was broadband access. Not everybody had internet at home that they could use to, of course, you think about schooling, but I also think about the amazing leaps in telehealth, not having to go to the doctor's office if you're trying to avoid being around other people. Well, can you do that appointment remotely? Is that something your phone allows you to do? Do you have a laptop to be able to do that? And so, so many people were dependent on libraries and other public spaces to have that internet access. And of course, those spaces weren't safe in the same way that they were previously. So the Tequity effort that we lifted at United Way is about a couple things. One is we're helping companies donate the physical equipment that's still great, but no longer meets their sort of cutting edge business needs. And we're also asking people to donate to help make that Wi-Fi access more accessible for other people. We're also working on the advocacy side to say, we might be past the point where Wi-Fi is a luxury and we really need to start treating it like a utility that everybody needs. And so really grateful to everybody who's already donated equipment or dollars to that effort and excited about the work we have ahead.
Yeah, it's such an important issue because you think about, so many of our kids right now are in virtual settings, and in order for them to achieve and to learn at their full capacity, their full capabilities, you have to have the technology. It just doesn't happen if you don't have reliable technology.
Yeah, and it's, the days of, the want ads in the newspaper are really behind us. If you're somebody looking for a job or looking for a better job, we do all of that online. And, we want everybody to have those same opportunities. That's our goal.
Help us understand the changing world of philanthropy. You have a fairly large group of boomers who are reaching a certain point in their life, and I know the United Way does work that is designed to make sure that boomers remain attached to the United Way and continue to be generous to the United Way. But now you're moving into different generations. Is there a different strategy to involve those folks who are following the boomers? What are you doing to make sure that the pipeline to the United Way continues for years into the future?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this, and there's definitely some merit to what the way you asked the question, Mike. But I think it's more about degrees than something wildly different. I think what donors want is to understand how their gift makes a positive change in their community that they can feel really good about. Full stop. I think that's what everybody wants in the gifts that they make. And so our job at United Way is to make sure we're really clear with donors about that we have every story, every data point available for people who want to dig in and understand how their dollars make a difference. We also have a lot of flexibility in how people can give. So we have thousands and thousands of amazing donors who give their entire gift to our community fund. The community fund is how we fund more than 200 programs across that 4-county region. When I started at the beginning of our time together and saying we had this great group of nonprofits who were available to do services in our region, part of the reason that exists already in our community is our community fund donors. And that's incredible. But other people say, like, gosh, that's pretty amorphous to me. I'm glad that exists, but that's not really what excites me as a donor. So what we also tell donors is, great, you're passionate about homelessness. Let's talk about our Safe and Stable Homes effort and how your donation can help end family homelessness in our region. Or other people say, like, for me, it's really about the job. It's really about making sure people are connected to work and can be treated with dignity and respect and advance in their workplaces. And we say, awesome. Let's talk about our reducing barriers to employment and advancement work, and on and on. So our goal is, we can't be all things to all people. I'm so glad that UPAF and other awesome organizations exist in our community. But my hope is there's something happening in the work at United Way that if somebody takes, just a few minutes to dig in, they personally can feel really connected to and feel really passionate about. When I think about myself and in ways that I've spent money over the years, almost nothing feels as good as it feels to feel like you're really making an impact on an issue you care about in a community that you care about. And so I think I have the best job in town because I feel like I get to connect people who care to ways that they can help. And that feels like a heck of a privilege.
Well, you mentioned your own connection to this kind of work, and let's explore that a little bit. What was it about the nonprofit world that drew you? You were a partner in a successful law firm here in town. We'll talk about that in a moment. But you left that job to take a leadership role with Meta House, which does great work with women who are struggling with their addiction issues. Surely something called you that said, this is something that is going to be my life's work. I have to do this. What was it?
Yeah, for me, Mike, it really was a running to and not a running from. Yeah. I love being a lawyer. I keep up my law license. I volunteer when I can, which feels awesome. But I love so many things about practicing law. And so it really was just the power of being able to see how people's lives were changed when great nonprofits did what they do best. And so, Meta House was the first nonprofit that I had any significant involvement in. And you got to see the stories of the women whose lives were utterly transformed because they were able to get help they needed it at the time they needed it. Sort of full stop. And so, I was a litigator. So I was somebody, involved with, ongoing cases where parties are adversarial and fighting for the outcome that they want for their company. And there's lots of parts of that appeal to sort of the fight in my personality. And I don't see the work I do now all that differently. It's just a question of who you're fighting for. and getting to fight for people who don't always have enough people in their corner. I just see as this incredible privilege because I can see the faces, even, here at United Way, where I don't do direct service, where I don't get to see the people who we're helping every day. I've seen those faces. I know those faces, whether it's somebody at La Casa in Waukesha, where, the parking lot of La Casa used to be where my grandparents' house was. So, I would walk by and see the little ones playing there, or whether it's, the people who are at the guest house right now who have somewhere safe to be and had a healthy lunch and were able to get help they needed. That fills me in a way that I feel like I had the best job in town because it feels really, really good to be able to get involved with that work. It's so clear to me the impact we're having, and that's pretty amazing.
It's interesting. You mentioned Waukesha a couple of times in our conversation. How did your childhood in Waukesha help shape you and help turn you into the person you are today?
Yeah, I mean, Waukesha was an incredible community to grow up, even though my family really early on in my childhood was really economically precarious. We had so many advantages getting to live in the city of Waukesha. We had these incredible safe neighborhoods. We had economically diverse neighborhoods. I lived in a duplex for my early childhood that my mom and dad rented, but we had homeowners, stable homeowners, the same neighbors years after year around us. So that the Girl Scout troop I was a member of, had stay-at-home moms who were available after school, and your troop could get together at their house, and your mom didn't have to worry about, if you were safe after school or how to pay for that childcare, how to make that work. We also had, Waukesha continues to have world-class schools. And so I had this incredible opportunity to just have all of this love and education poured into me, through that great school system. I was also surrounded by family. I was very lucky that almost all of my extended family grew up in Waukesha. And so when I wasn't with my parents, I was with my grandma, or I was with my aunt. And just, it's just the childhood I want for everybody, to be surrounded by love, to have access to great schools and safe neighborhoods. And I hope I would be great no matter where I grew up, but I'm really grateful that I got to grow up where I did.
So you mentioned, you loved being an attorney. You were running from something to something. You loved being an attorney. I'm wondering, and I've asked this of other guests at the law school who are not practicing law today, but who still talk at length about what they learned in law school and what they learned in the practice of law that helps them do their job today. What was it that you learned that helps you today?
So much. I think law schools tell themselves that they teach people how to think. And I would echo that. Just to be able to sit down and think hard about big problems is a really necessary skill. And so it's really helpful to be able to look at a problem, try to analyze it from all angles, and then try to find that path forward. I also think about advocacy. I used to advocate for mostly intellectual property litigants, but now I get to advocate for our community and the type of community I want all of us to live in. And so there's so many parts of that are transferable. Who gets to spend as much time learning to write? Who gets to spend as much time learning to speak as those of us who are just so lucky to get to go to law school? And so I went to Notre Dame. Sorry about that, Marquette.
It happens.
But yeah, it's an okay school. And, met great friends and did lots of other good stuff too. But, I haven't given up my law license. I still try to carve out some time, not as much as I wish I did, to volunteer, including with the great Marquette volunteer legal clinic, where you both get to see individuals who don't have the resources to hire a lawyer, and you get to mentor students and show them what it means to really be with clients. And it's just an incredible resource for our community. And I just got an email this morning saying, are you sure you can't sign up for some shifts this spring? And I'm looking at my calendar trying to figure out how to do that, because for those of us who do have that ability, it's a really powerful way to volunteer, because everybody deserves access to justice.
Before we began this, I asked Amy if she grows tired of telling this story, and I'm going to ask her to tell it one more time. But it is a fascinating story because I think it says something about who you are and your view of the world, and that you can learn wherever you are and make a difference wherever you are. You worked between, my understanding is, and I think this was a Milwaukee Magazine story that did a great job of laying this out, but I think it was between your undergrad years and your law school years. You worked a year in an auto repair shop. Probably not what most people are thinking about going to law school or going to be identifying, but that's
Yeah.
where you worked. Tell us about that experience and what that meant to you and what it still means to you today.
Yeah, well, I have to say, Jim Kilpatrick Engine and Transmission, the shop in Waukesha, great car repair shop. Jim's an honest, good, amazing mechanic and guy. I think I'm honored to say, I'm honored to hear you say, Mike, that it says something about who I am, because I really believe that all jobs have value, all jobs have dignity, all people have value and dignity. And if wherever you are, if you're just trying to do the best you can do, that's an honorable thing. And whether you're getting to run an organization like I get to run now, or whether you're working in a law firm, or whether you're sitting at a desk and greeting a person when they come into the car repair shop, the way we treat each other just makes such an impact. And something I was really passionate about when I was at Kilpatrick's, and that I've carried through to this day, is nobody likes being in a situation where they feel like they don't understand something. And unlike back in the 60s and 70s, most of us don't understand our cars. And going into the garage because your car is making a funny noise just isn't fun for most people. And so to greet people with empathy and to be clear with them and to explain things in a way that they have hope of understanding, bringing people into the conversation instead of trying to exclude people because they don't know something you happen to know. Those skills are just beautiful. And I wish everybody could use every opportunity they can to have them. There is one funny thing I would do at the garage that I'll admit to you, because I like you so much, Mike, which is, people will come in and tell you your car is making a noise. And you, of course, have to ask them, well, what kind of noise is it making? Because the mechanic is going to ask you. And then, they would make some funny sound. And I would get a little bit of joy, particularly. I'm not going to admit that part, but I would get a little bit of joy when I would ask somebody, like, you mean like this? And if you made a little bit of the sound, you could get them to really dig in. And so somebody who would be like, my car is sort of going like, rrr, rrr, rrr. I would be like, is your car going like, rrr, rrr? They'd be like, no, it's like, rrr, rrr. Like, they would really go for it. And it was just a little bit of joy in my days. But to call people and say, this is what happened to your car, this is why it cost this much, this is how many of these parts cost, just being clear and kind to people, it's something we all can do in all of our jobs. And I'm really grateful I now know how my car works. So when I have to take my car to the garage, I'm not worried about talking to the person on the other end of the phone.
My wife worked in retail too. And so I completely hear what you're saying, because it teaches you so much about your interactions with the public and how you can make a difference in one individual's life that day just by the way you treat them. Just
No
by
question.
the way. Yeah, it's
No
a great learning experience. I want to give you a chance because I know the campaign, this year's campaign for the United Way, is coming to a close. I think December 8th is the final day. I'll give you a chance to send a message to folks who are watching this and who can get the word out about this. What do you need right now? What is the goal, and what could help you best achieve that goal in these final days?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. We're in the last days of our campaign, and, we set a goal of raising $55 million this year, which is the same goal that we set last year. But of course, the world isn't the same place as it was a year ago. And so there are people who give to the United Way campaign every single year who just were not in a position to do that this year. And so that $55 million goal we knew would be a stretch. And so if you're somebody who is not given to your community this year and you're in a position to do so, I would ask you to give to the United Way campaign or to any organization that you're most passionate about. This is a time where our community really needs us. And we all have some ability to make a difference. And for some of us, that's our time. For some of us, that's our dollars. For those of us who are able to give dollars, for some of us, it's $5. And for some of us, it's $5,000 or $50,000. And what to me is much more important than the number is the fact of taking the time and making the effort of doing so if you can. I think the power of the United Way is that no one of us can do all that needs to be done. But when we pull together, when we say live united, when this person does the little bit that they can, and this person does the little bit that they can, it collectively makes a huge impact to our community. And so if you can, please give. And if you aren't in a position to do that this year, please do what you can for somebody else, whether it's that moment of kindness. At the United Way website, we have virtual volunteer opportunities that include writing notes of encouragement, making sure somebody gets just a reminder that their community cares about them and is rooting for them. And that too has a lot of power.
You mentioned volunteers, Amy. Do you have enough volunteers? How has the pandemic changed that?
Volunteerism looks so different in this minute, Mike,
Yeah.
but it is happening. Just sort of the spirit of people and the spirit of people in our community is so powerful. So if you go to the United Way website and specifically go to our volunteer tab, our team under Jane Thoma's leadership has done incredible work being so creative and finding how to make as many volunteer opportunities as possible virtual. So that part, very safe, great for people who have the ability to do that. I think about the Mask Up Milwaukee project that happened earlier this year, at a time where there weren't masks available for sale at every place you went to. We got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of masks into this community. Part of the work that the United Way team did there, Mike, is making sure it was safe for people. So we had volunteers calling to do health checks on everybody before they got their box of masks to make in their home, and then storing those masks safely for a number of days before we called people again on the other end of that to make sure they were still well and it felt safe to give out those masks. Now, we've learned a lot in the months since about how the disease is transmitted and et cetera, but the point of it is volunteers can just do so much to help people. And we love volunteers. They're really incredible.
Amy Lindner is the president and CEO of the United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County. How's that working out, incidentally, having the Greater Milwaukee Waukesha County thing? I got to ask before you leave, because that was an important part. It was kind of a signal to the whole community that, yes, we are not just separate entities, that we can all work together. Has it worked out as well as you and others would have liked?
Yeah, we want to keep going, Mike. There's work to still be done. There's nothing magical about 124th Street that makes our communities wildly different from each other. People live in different communities. People even inside Milwaukee County live in different communities. We say Waukesha County all the time. Heartland is not the same as Mugwanago, is not the same as New Berlin, is not the same as Pewaukee. These are all individual communities. But we've seen some really great stories, some really great wins that have happened from that collaboration. And so one of them that I think about is the Waukesha Overflow Center that we were able to open 2 years ago in Waukesha County, in the city of Waukesha. Didn't have a shelter operator. And it is a specific set of knowledge and skills to safely run a shelter. You have people in your care who need particular expertise to be able to do that. And none of the awesome Waukesha organizations that we work with just had the bandwidth at the time to do that. We were able to connect with Community Advocates, which happens to be headquartered in Milwaukee, who ended up being the organization that backboned and staffed that great, badly needed organization. The same thing happened in the other direction when a nonprofit in Milwaukee closed very suddenly. And one of the programs that they had previously been providing was some really important outreach to seniors who would otherwise be really isolated. ERAS is a wonderful organization in Waukesha who had a great system already in place to do outreach to seniors like that. So we approached them and asked if they would be willing to do those same great services in Milwaukee County, in addition to the work they were already doing in Waukesha. And we're so grateful that they said yes. So if you're somebody who needs help, you don't care where the nonprofit you're working with is headquartered. You care that there's help available for you where you're located. And so I think what we're going to continue to see is the more we can do this work together, the better off all of our communities will be.
All right. I was wrapping it up once before, but this time I'm really doing it. So Amy Lindner, the president and CEO of the United Way, the 4-county United Way here in the Milwaukee area. It's good to be with you today. Happy holidays and good luck with the remainder of the campaign. Okay.
Thank you so much, Mike.
All right. And thanks everybody out there for watching today. We'll see you next time on The Issues.